Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. And my name is Solvita ZARINA, and I'm the moderator for this panel about virtual sensing and experiential art practices. However, I see one of my speakers, Anna Priedola. Maybe others will join shortly. I'm
here as well.
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you, Karla, because you are my first speaker. I'm very glad to see you. Yeah. First, I would like to remind some organizational things. Each panelist has 20-minute time for the presentation, including 1 to 2 questions. And if you are going to present video, please do not forget to check the box optimized for video. And please feel free to ask questions in the chat, and the presenters will be happy to answer them after their presentations or in the same chat. And please mute your microphones, but I see that I'm only one vocal now. Thank you. And now I am about to introduce our first speaker, Karla BRUNET. Karla is an artist and researcher. She holds a PhD in audio-visual communication. She is currently a visiting researcher at Polytechnic University of Valencia, Spain, but Karla BRUNET is a professor at the Federal University of Bahia, Brazil. And Karla's artistic practices involve photography, video art, data visualization, sensory environment, hybrid art, audio-visual performance, web art, artistic mapping, and game. It seems so exciting that I'm really waiting for your presentation. And Karla, the floor now is yours. Good luck.
Thank you. I'm going to start the sharing. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to... Are you watching? Is that okay?
Everything is okay.
Yeah, good. Just to check, because sometimes we start presenting and then the screen is not showing. It's good to check first. I'm gonna start showing a project that it's a work in progress. It's the beginning of the project, of a larger project that I decided to show here. And as you told, I'm living in Spain now, but I'm from Brazil, and I work in Bahia in a university that's by the coast. And the last 10 years or even more, like 12, 13 years, I've been working with the ocean around me where I live. And then now that I'm these months here in Spain, I decided to do a project about the Mediterranean. And then I decided to collect data and create a project on my view of this different sea that's very different from the one I come from. And the first place that I decided to go for the project was the Ebro Delta, where the river, the mouth of the river gets together with the sea, and it's a very important relation to the ecosystem here. So I'm going to show a little bit of what I'm doing and what's the idea of this project. So first, I'm just showing the beginning of the project. I don't have the outcome yet, but it's a little bit the discussion on the river. And so I decided to go to this place and collect different kind of narratives and also scientific data, but in a way of citizen science. So I decided to do all the trips around there using a bicycle or a kayak. So it was a better way to connect to the place and to feel the environment, to smell, and I could go slow and I could get the sounds of it. So if the bicycle is different, I think the smell is the very first sense that you feel the difference when you are in a train or in a car or in a bus, because there is an area with a lot of rice fields and you could smell the plantation really well. So that's one of the reason I decided to go with the bicycle. And also the kayak, I did a few trips with the kayak, so I could also hear the birds, sense the river, and sense if we could. One of the ideas was to go all the way to the river mouth, but then they cancel, the people that rent me the kayak. They canceled because it was a bad weather, because we have been having some floods here in Spain lately. So that was it was starting one of those really like the thunderstorms and things. So, and I was there for 7 days, but 2 days I had to go to another town and come back for work. So that was the idea of sensing and also collecting this data, also talking to people, getting narratives of the place and the stories of there. So it's just a little bit of the river. And also I decided to use some digital water testers to test the water and to fill the water, because one of the narratives that came a lot for me is that the river is salty. And then, so I decided to get this small water tester. So I was getting data from like pH of the water, and also conductivity, and also salinity. And this was the idea, was that the accuracy was not like very important. Of course, I tested all the meters before I used, and we have like different powders and different testers. So I always test and calibrate the meters, but it's more the idea of citizen science and trying to understand, because people say, oh, the water's salty here. But then I decided to collect this data, and I create a table with different data. So when I collect which place and how deep I was in the water and these things. So I decided. Also, I took video and audio recorders to record these narratives, and also to record my feeling in this place, my sensing, how I was sensing the place and how I was feeling the place. So here's some of the cameras that I took, just as a form of like going. And also I decided to use a lot of maps and GPS to get the tracks and where I went and how I moved in this place, and how I was in the points I was collecting data, scientific data, and also I was collecting stories. Here's the map that I did at home before I went there, choosing the places where I'm gonna go. So I put some, it's even behind me here, sometimes the background shows. And I was decided where to go and planning the trip. And for me, I faced this trip as to go there and to collect this data as an expedition to collect, because in Brazil I have a research group that I coordinate that's called EcoArte, and we work a lot with art and environment, especially sea and the rivers around. And I've done former projects also together with scientists, where I've been to Antarctica with them, also collecting these stories and later I work with data visualization with their data. And also I've been another expedition with the Amazon River for 11 days, paddling a canoe in the river and also collecting these stories. And I didn't collect data there, but then I mixed with data that I collect later, not doing the in loco. And this time I'm trying to do both at the same time, but I'm collecting, I'm not using scientific data, but it's more citizen science. So this is a little bit material that I could fit in the bike and my backpack. So it's just like the idea of an expedition to go and feel this place and sense this place as an artist. And then many stories came out, and then people were discussing about like, this is a very important area for the rice fields. And they were complaining a lot about these different floods, and they had a big one a few years ago. And then there was another one coming up. There were the days I was there, they were advising, don't go on the bicycle, be careful next day, because there is a thunderstorm coming and it's gonna flood everything. And then they were talking to me a lot about the invasive species, that they have a big snail, it's like this big. And it's called apple snails that eating all the rice. And then they have also another invasive species that's a crab that they call American crab, a very red one. And also it's invasive and also damage the rice. So they're all worried about the rice. And the people that I talked, they also told me that the river is very salty. and the different water levels of the river, that you can, if you go 2 meters down, the water is going to be salty. I didn't go 2 meters down because they also told me that nobody dives in the river, that's dangerous, so I never knew what to do. And then this was the last minute when they said me that the water is very salty 2 meters down. And this is the rice fields there, and they have a lot of politics of the water too, because there is these channels of the waters everywhere. Everywhere I would go and cycle, there is like a little water canal where I can, and then I interview one of the persons that used to work for controlling the water and how they do the control, how they decide, who decides who get the water, who doesn't get the water, and how much water they put and pump or not. So I was also getting to know, this is the river mouth where also I got collected data, and also to see how salty the water was there. And also the stories of the people. I was hearing like boys saying, a father told the boy, oh, it's very salty, the water here. How do you know that? And they started discussing. I was just listening to them and then taking notes of their stories. And then also there is a story of a lighthouse that's not in the middle of the sea, I just put in the middle, but it's called Faro de Cabo Tortosa. And this lighthouse is about a few kilometers away from the coast. And they said in the 50s, they were telling stories that they could walk there. And now the sea level higher, you cannot walk, just by boat you can go there. So it's a different also story and ways of getting this connection to the river and to the delta. Here is a little bit of the water and all the... And another thing that I put this video just to show, like the rain, that one night rained just a few hours and it was all flooded the way the next day. And they are really worried about not only the floods of the rain, but also the sea level, because it's very low, the area, the whole area of the delta is sometimes it's even below sea level a bit. And it's a lot of, and they got flooded easily because sometimes they put the water just to flood the rice fields and then put down. So it's a way they control the water, but then there is some waters that they cannot control, like the rain or the rising sea levels. And it's a concern about everybody that I talked, even the people from the kayak place, or the people that work with the rice, or the water control people, they all talk about this being a problem. And this is where the ocean gets, the river gets to the sea. And it's interesting because it's very empty there. It's not a tourist area like other places in Spain, the Spanish coast. It's very empty, just a few people. They're very concerned about the environment. There is almost no bars and restaurants and things like that. It's not a lot of construction, so it's well kept in a way. Another thing that's interesting is like the pollution also in the river that they were talking about, the factories and companies that are up the river that would pollute the river and then it would come to them. Here is also another area of the mouth of the river where, and this is some fishermen that I was talking to, and they fish sea bass, and it's a fish of the sea, and this was like, I don't know, 20 kilometers away from the sea mouth, and the fish and those fish from the sea goes there because, as they said, the water is salty down there, so they can have sea fish there. So it's a mix of fresh water and salt water. So that's why they were fishing, and they fish in these specific boats that they call duck, where they go with the fins just moving their legs and fishing. So there is no engine or anything, and no paddle also. So this is a bit the sense of being there. So I don't know yet. I was just collecting this data in the last week of August, and I was analyzing, and then I created a table with all the scientific data, and I collect the stories and I create a thing, but I don't have yet the outcome of it. What's gonna be? I'm still preparing. Maybe it's gonna be a subjective cartography of what I saw and what I seen there, or it could be an audiovisual performance where I mix all this information and people can get a feeling of this place, or interactive map or installation, or I can do some data visualizations with the data that I collect, because I create a table, and then now I'm thinking how to visualize that and how to better understand this data, the scientific, and also create a map, since it's a larger project about the Mediterranean, and I create a little map of the places I wanted to go. Of course, I'll not go to all these places because it depends of time and money and everything. But next week I'm going to do an audiovisual performance in Seville. So I go a few days before, and I'm gonna do the crossing of Ceuta and Gibraltar, because I think it's a very important symbolic path to the Mediterranean, to the entrance. So I'm collecting these questions, and this is all the paths, the map that I created for all the paths that I did cycling in the area where I went to collect data, collect story. I just went there and sit and try to talk to somebody, or just to hear what people were talking. Since I was alone, it's easier to hear what others talk and then collect stories. Even there is a funny story in the place where I stay. It was very, very small town. There was only one restaurant working, and I would go there every day in the late afternoon, evening to eat. And then my last day, the guy asked me, as a teenager, like I was 16 years old, the waiter, he came to me and said, "You come here every day and you eat, yesterday you have that, and the other day," he knew everything that I had eaten the last few days. And he said, "But I have a question for you. What you always writing? Every time you come here, you sit and you write and you write and you write." So it was interesting because they were, of course, I was writing while I was listening to people talk and the questions, and I was kind of sucking all these, like I was being kind of a sponge to suck all these feelings of this different place. And these stories are some stories that I heard in the morning, but I was cycling and I was measuring data and I couldn't write. So when I sit down to eat, I would write, take notes. And they thought was interesting. What she's taking notes about the food, or what's in relation. So it's very interesting because even people, and then that brought me a discussion about the environment, all the issues they were telling me. So it was a way to talk to them also about, and so it was interesting. The blue line is the what I did with kayak, and I had to repeat some of the routes because when I reserved the kayak, one of the days they didn't let me go to the river mouth because I was alone, and they said there was no groups because of the bad weather, so I couldn't go all the way to the river mouth. Maybe I come back there, I don't know. And this is one of the persons that I interview, and I did some formal interviews and others. I collected data, and he told me about the stories when he was young and what he was doing in the river, in the delta, and everything. This is another person that I interviewed. That's a person from he used to work with the water control in the channels. So he was telling me how the water works and what's the politics of the water and how they control the water. So just a little bit like images. I did like hundreds of videos and photos and things. So just to have a sense of what this place was. The good thing about being alone, it was not like a tour or something, the kayak, because then I could stop and record videos, record sounds. So as I said, I still don't have the outcomes, just the feeling and how I was sensing that. And I hope I can have, I'm now in the phase where I collect the data and then I look at the data and then I start to thinking how it's gonna be. But my idea is that to create this kind of sense of the delta for the people who see the actual outcome. So this is another image of the river with them. And So I'm looking at the time, right on time. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, or if you have any interesting idea that you wanted to see about this project, or this could be interesting if you do, I'm open to comments and questions. And that's my website, and also the website of the research group that I coordinate in Brazil, that we work a lot with the ocean and the sea around us and rivers around us.
Thank you very much, Karla, for your lively and very interesting presentation. And when I learned about your multidisciplinary artistic practices, they made sense during your presentation perfectly. And I think that this ability to be very joyful and even with some elements of game, tackling issues, not always so easy, positive, sometimes politics involved. This is a real nice way how to make these art projects. And since I don't see any question, I have a question, and it could be like a tourist, because if Brazil, then Amazon. And you mentioned that you had Amazon small expedition as well. Maybe some similarities or differences from this project?
Is in the Amazon, for me, it was not small because it was 11 days paddling. It was really hard. So when you were paddling, you were feeling the river. It's different. You're feeling this huge river, and we have like some thunderstorms and broke one of the canoes. It was like, and then you could feel how strong is the river, and you can get that sense. And here also, of course, I come from, Amazon is far from where I live too. It's not like my environment. I work a lot with the ocean around me. That's my environment. But the Bay Sea and the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. But it's different from you were asking what's the difference from this and tourism, is the idea that how do I sense and how do I create? How do I create questionings? Because as a tourist, you go there, you see, you take nice photos, and then you leave. But then my idea of going there is to create questions, just not only for me, because I'm there to collect this in this sense, and I, as a sponge, I said, trying to collect what's in there about the space. And also I try to not catch attention, to be very discreet in a way, or to blend in, because then people tell me stories and I like to go alone, never in groups or things like that, because when you are in a group, it's different that people open yourself to you. And if you are alone, usually people open yourself or they question you, or if you're there, then you can collect more these senses because you don't invade them. You let them to embrace you in a way. So as an artist, I think for me is working with the environment. For me is very important, these kind of expeditions, to go in local and to feel the place, and then to reflect on things that I heard, and then to create a project. But that's what I did also in Antarctica, that I presented last year in one of your conferences too. And I was there working with the scientists. And then it was a completely different way. That was like really, and I was in the army boat, and it was really strict, everything. So it's a different way also of interacting with the environment, because I could only allow to walk when they let me walk. I could only allow to go in the water when they let me go in the boat. So it was different. But here, no, here I had more freedom. But also, and it was, I think for me, the most important thing is like raise questionings, because a question is an awareness. So that's, I think, the difference. It's more like in a scientific, because I work a lot of scientists for more than 10 years. I work with them, the oceanographers and biologists. And then I think these expeditions for me are more like the scientific expeditions, but as an artist, not as a scientist, than as a tourist. Like that. I don't know if I answer your question.
Now I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, Juliana Priest. Juliana, are you here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Very nice. And Juliana Priest, a New Zealand and United Kingdom artist currently living in Denmark and exhibiting internationally. He uses a wide range of participatory and technological forms, exploring themes including infrastructures, time, energy, security, space, environment, gravity, and communication. Besides lecturing at Auckland University of Technology, Massey University and Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand, Julian is currently working with students at IT University of Copenhagen, Denmark. And Julian, the floor now is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen quickly. One sec. Okay, so hello, it's a great pleasure to be here again. I thought I'd first just quickly read out the abstract I wrote for this talk. I said, in an increasingly digital, urbanized and anthropogenic world, experience is continually mediated and abstracted by multiple layers, creating a distance between individual experience and the supporting ecology. This distance can work against the possibility of environmental action. Reconnection can perhaps be established through an expeditionary residency technique in which a group journeys through an urban land or seascape in the context of local knowledge, producing new cultural work in the process. So next, I'd like to thank RIXC for organising this amazing online festival in such challenging circumstances, and brings back memories of the many real conferences and festivals that have taken place in Riga. I'd first like to introduce this topic a bit by looking at the conference format, which contrasts with these previous physical conferences. Here in Denmark, most COVID constrictions have now been lifted, but on Monday I just attended the first actual physical conference in 2 years with 140 members of my faculty, which was a really huge contrast. But I'd like to just ask you to pay attention to where you're sitting. You're probably at a computer listening to sound, perhaps on headphones, looking at a Zoom screen with the names and faces of all the other participants, posting questions in chat windows. Perhaps you're multitasking, childminding, emailing at the same time. And this has been the reality of our daily workplace and most social interaction for the last year and a half. It's been a hypermediated and alienating experience for many. However, during the lockdown periods when we were prohibited from meeting indoors, we would meet outside, go for walks in the fresh air and maintain social bonds through walking and talking, a regular pattern of small expeditions in our local area. During holiday periods when overseas travel was banned, people rediscovered their local places in Denmark, taking trips to regional cities, hiking, in some cases people moving out of the cities altogether. Rural summer houses, boats and harbour places were all in high demand. So in this context, I'd like to talk a little bit about expeditions and their rationale, but mainly would like to introduce a previous project called Slow Flow. Lastly, I'll describe an attempt to create a kind of general model for an expedition using an educational framework called SET. This kind of new work is at a very early stage, so this is again a kind of work in progress, more of an introduction to future work than a presentation of results. So Slow Flow was a series of 3 expeditions in New Zealand on the Wanganui River that took place between 2009 and 2011. After the global financial crisis in 2008, it became clear that the pace of the environmental crisis was increasing. There was an emerging discourse at that time around the post-digital, the environmental footprint of networks and computing, the Anthropocene, energetics, Earth magnitude, and a re-evaluation of the concept of nature. There had been online conferences. I don't know if you remember the Electrosmog conference that looked at completely online formats, which have now become commonplace like this one. But Slow Flow was really an experiment with a kind of radical disconnection, although it did come out of kind of open source and media arts methodologies. In a way, you could think of it as a kind of a return to an acoustic space a bit like an unmediated version of McLuhan's acoustic space, looking at unmediated conversation and unmediated experience of our environment. The motivation of the Slow Flow project was to create a conference residency format to discuss these environmental topics in a setting with a direct connection with ecology, environment, and also culture. It was created in collaboration between the Green Bench Gallery and a Maori River educator called Michael Poa and his One River organisation. The first step of this process involved kind of gathering. We made local invitations to artists who lived in New Zealand, but we also posted on national and international mailing lists like ADA, Spectre, NetTime, and Renewables. The participants were very varied, some local, some international, a mixture of curators, environmentalists, technologists, media artists, scientists, writers, filmmakers, traditional instrument musicians, philosophers, and also just local community. The intention was to create a highly interdisciplinary conversation to explore technological and environmental topics in the context of traditional knowledge. And then these are some of the participants from some of the expeditions. The landscape that this took place in was on the North Island of New Zealand. The expeditions took between 5 and 14 days, and they went from the volcanoes of the central North Island to the sea along the Whanganui River. Here you can see it from the sea side looking into the center of the country. It's a very remote area. As you can see on this map, there's no roads. Access is basically by river, and it's largely a temperate rainforest. Most of the journey took place going through a national park. There's no cell phone service, and for much of the journey that was in canyons, there was not even satellite or GPS coverage. You can see the landscape makes a lot more sense when looked at from the point of view of a river. These are basically the roads of that region. You can see it was really like a proper traditional expedition with lots of equipment. We had to take everything that we needed into the river with us to keep us all equipment and food and provisions that we needed for the entire duration of the trip. It's quite a raw place. You're really kind of directly exposed to the elements and the environment around you. We were there at the invitation of Mike Poa and One River, and therefore we were invited to stay in this series of maraes, which are traditional meeting houses that still exist in the river. The vessel that we traveled on was this Waka Orua. It's a large canoe that can seat about 20, has about 28 seats. I think we were about 20 on one of the journeys. And one thing that you can see about this vessel is that it consists of 2 hulls which are next to each other. Basically, the ship, it's a bit like Foucault's heterotopia par excellence. It's a place that moves through a place. The design of this vessel with its 2 hulls allows, it takes coordination to paddle it. It was very tight getting it around the bends. So it was a kind of inherently collaborative space. But also the design with the 2 hulls had this feature that you would always be sitting next to someone and always conversing with someone as you were passing through the landscape. We had a policy of changing the seating plan every hour or so. And the result of it was that over the 2 weeks of the journey, you would have multiple, 2-3 hour conversations with all of the different participants. And so it was a bit like all of the breakout sessions of a conference continually joined together for up to 2 weeks. So we got to know each other very well. One thing about this is that during the course of this expedition, a kind of a new culture developed, and also in some ways a new language, both a kind of a blend of the different languages that people spoke. But I thought of it a bit like a kind of cultural heterotopia of a kind of temporary culture that moves through another kind of cultural landscape. This is a joyful moment in a rainstorm. We basically spent, the idea was to move extremely slowly. We weren't in any great hurry, and we'd spend a lot of time just drifting and talking down this river. Part of the journey took place on bicycles, where we hit the kind of gravel road at the end of the river, and so we had a kind of multimodal transport technique. But the group was joined by other people from the local community and kind of expanded. So this area is a historical area of Maori settlement. Pre-colonization, there were 60,000 people living on the Wanganui River. Now there are just 200. There are about 40,000 living in the Wanganui town, but the countryside has largely been abandoned. It's a national park area, and therefore it's not really wild, but it is perhaps protected from industrial pastoralism. It's a site of contestation. The Wanganui River National Park was occupied in the 1993 Tiaki occupation, and Wanganui itself was a start of a contestation of the Waitangi Tribunal Treaty, which established New Zealand. Wanganui River is also interesting because it in 2017 became the world's first river to achieve personhood and have rights of its own. It was also an area which was rich in countercultural New Zealand history. James K. Baxter, a famous poet in the 60s, set up a commune, a kind of bicultural commune, which met Maori culture and blended it with Pākehā European counterculture, which I think is a strong part of New Zealand's post-colonial identity formation process. This is the place Hiruharama where that commune was set up, and this led to this is an abandoned geodesic dome in a kind of back to the land commune that was set up in the local area. So this kind of countercultural experimentation continued in the area. So this point of so from the point of view of the expedition, we kind of like passed through and met representatives of these various different kind of cultural and historical and environmental threads, and this informed the kind of artists and cultural producers' work. The work was shown later in a gallery exhibition at the Green Bench Gallery in Wanganui, but the project itself was never really considered to be an artwork, more as a place to develop new work and new ideas. Most of the ideas that were developed in the process of the project actually had outputs which were separate from this particular gallery exhibition, but there were kind of many of them. And this is an opening. So what we've started doing since in the last few months, I took part in a summer school at Catch in Helsingør, which is a kind of art science cultural institution, and with another group, we started to try to develop a kind of generalized version of this expeditionary methodology, which will be published sometime next year. Set is it's an attempt to develop a set of open source educational patterns on different topics at the intersection of science, aesthetics, and technology that can then be used in different contexts. They're like kind of blueprints for different types of practice. and we're going to try and develop an experiment with kind of expeditionary methodology as one of these sets. And lastly, this is also a bit of a call for collaboration. I'd like to try and experiment with these expeditionary techniques in the Baltic area and in the sea, perhaps linking cultural institutions and developing some new kind of local expeditions along these kind of lines over the next few years. And with that, I think that's all I've got.
Thank you very much. And I recalled my memories of New Zealand. And first of all, I wanted to ask why you have chosen this particular place, river, and so on. But then I thought that maybe I would like to, Karla, BRUNET, ask some more specific and related question to your both interest in projects involving at least water and some other aspects more or less similar. Karla, maybe you can can ask.
Yes, when I have also some classes that I teach that's called the Art of Walking, that I take students to walk in the island around. Yeah. And it's very similar. The kind of propositions of these expeditions is that also the walking class is a lot about being disconnected. And in Brazil, there's many areas where there is no internet connection. So it's very good to do that, yeah, because we are forced to, even though if you don't want, you are forced. But when you do these projects like the one you were showing in the rivers, do they have to do some kind of outcome of it, or the process is the most important thing?
Well, this one, the Slow Flow project was set up as a kind of a residency, so it was an invitation for people to come and make work. But in fact, it turned out to be not the most important thing, I would say. So I would say actually the experience of this kind of, it was like a sort of creation of a temporary culture through the process of going, on this journey. I think that was the most vivid experience, although it did produce quite a lot of work. There were, lots and lots of, Stella Brennan made a piece of landscape endoscopy that was really amazing. And there were lots of different projects came out of it. But in fact, although that was, the intention was to create work, to create new work, I felt as if the experience of it was more important.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Julian. And you have one more question from Douglas Kahn. Could you say something about the rights of the river and whether you know of similar activities in the Baltic?
I don't know of any activities like that in the Baltic yet, but the rights of the river came out of a. I mean, in New Zealand, you have New Zealand was formed by a treaty, the Treaty of Waitangi, and that was a kind of deal between the Maori population and the English state, and it was a kind of, it was a treaty, but it had very kind of mixed language, and so that it has been heavily misinterpreted over the years, and therefore heavily disputed. So Whanganui had the longest running dispute over claims in New Zealand, and when at the time when I lived there, the treaty claims were still outstanding and unsettled. And as part of that process, the local iwi who were negotiating on behalf, the local Maori iwi, it's the kind of tribal grouping who were negotiating with the government, proposed this idea of giving the river its own legal personhood, because the river was sort of the river had been treated been treated as a kind of resource by, for instance, hydroelectricity, producers and, fisheries, and in the kind of typical kind of Western way, the river had been treated as a resource, and they felt that it would only in a way speak for itself if it had an actual legal personhood. And so written into this kind of 2017 treaty settlement was the idea that the river would be its own legal person, and I think it was the first river that has taken that status, and it's quite an interesting move, really, because it often you give custody of some kind of land to a particular group, whether it's mining industry or kind of indigenous population, or sometimes you would try and maybe kind of like price environmentalism into something using some kind of pricing mechanism. But in the Whanganui River's case, they said, no, we're going to give the river, rights as if it is a legal entity that can negotiate on its own behalf at the United Nations. And I think it has been replicated in a few places around the world. I think I can't remember the exact details, but I think it's a beginning of something.
Yeah, thank you very much. This was an amazing concept about river. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Anna Priedola. And Anna is an interdisciplinary artist that has explored data visualizations using food as a material in art since 2017. Showcasing social and economic issues of the data recipes. Very amazing concept, different from our previous presentations. And now, Anna, the floor is yours, please.
Hello, everybody. Do you hear me? And
yeah, everything is okay. Maybe full screen, and here we are. Yeah. Go.
And I'm this title of this presentation, Tasting Information. As it was said before, I have worked with food before, using it mostly for visualizing different kinds of data. First, I started to explore sustainability issues, really appreciating actually the degradable qualities of food as a material in art that is, doesn't leave trace. It doesn't leave trace after a very short-term exhibition, which the most are. And then I switched to exploring economic issues. I actually also presented in last year's conference. And recently, after some personal experiences, my recent project I will mostly talk about today is about visualizing dementia processes and data about the dementia in food. And also a big interest why I chose this material to use for data visualization is after reading some anthropologic texts about the importance of smell and taste of our prehistoric ancestors, and how taste served as a motivator for human evolution to develop new technology to get more tasty dishes and more tasty meals. To also, it was indicator, especially smell, a good indicator if the food was safe, and thus providing survival in the wilderness. But now, especially me myself, I feel that I'm so overwhelmed with all the visual and kind of blank information which we observe in most media, most information channels in everyday lives, where here one can see also some stock image. What you can Google when you Google hunter-gatherers, how they kind of pick food, and how should contemporary human pick food. Now there's a comparison, and actually I think also the first image is a bit corrupted because I don't know, if you go to a wood or forest to pick some berries or fruits, or especially mushrooms, you kind of first actually smell if there is something tasty, not like really go crawling and just like scanning all the wood visually. And I think we should not forget of these senses as our olfactory senses, taste and smell, and actually it can still be used as a detector to also keep our cognitive health. And this is one of my recent projects called the Book of Food, where I kind of also challenged this notion of reading information. I don't throw out fruit skins after and vegetable skins after cooking, and make again new kinds of like food sheets, and it is basically like an archive of my diet, or it can also serve as a real cookbook or like starter for my future meals, basically, for especially soups and broth, or even as a snack. It is very, very calming and meditative to read the material with the bodily senses, which is this theme of today, of this PostSensorium, not to read abstract digital text, but to really touch the material of these Book of Food sheets and smell it, and also take a bite of it, and also taste the sheets of cookbook. And here, you can see some images of a video I made documenting this project, which was developed for Pixel Egg Festival this summer. But of course, the development process is long with such mediums, so it was a year-long project still in development. Yeah, and today, after observing basically the slow death and corruption of my grandfathers who had dementia, I started to think about this issue and illness that I don't actually know much about it. In Latvia, we have very, very little information and resources about what it means, what is dementia. So I started to, of course, gather some information, what it is, what it means. And there I got a lot of data. I thought, this is something to really share with the local, especially the local community and society, to raise awareness of this issue, which is really not talked about much in society, but still affecting a lot of people. And the World Health Organization thinks that approximately up to 6 to 8% of seniors after age of 65 are suffering from some kind of dementia. And luckily, I was invited to collaborate with two Latvian contemporary art and culture organizations in a bigger European project, Art Mediators, where I could get more help with really talking to society and raising this issue really in a larger scale. So I was finally able to really organize workshops for society where we built this table which could be moved from one festival to another, and in collaboration with the art mediators we could work with the society and presenting them basically 3 activities, one of which is exhibition of my work, which represents dementia statistics in milk products or dairy products, and another workshop where the spectators were invited to make data visualizations in food themselves, thus also tasting them, and thus really kind of challenging their own perception and imagination. So to look into what was the actual artworks and the visualizations, here I used mostly curd, but also milk. And milk was chosen for several reasons as the material for this topic. First of all, it is, according to many scientists, doctors, not a good product to eat to really keep cognitive health in long age, because of the fat content, especially in cheese, unfortunately, that it is not good for our vascular health and our this brain blood circulation. So this can cause brain strokes, which are not really damaging for brain health. And also this white, it is a very white and actually bland material. And later I will show the comparison of the data recipes which were made from the recommended products for keeping good cognitive health, and these are bold and colorful and really stimulating the perception, whereas the milk products are very giving very little stimuli actually, except maybe the smell. And and also it is a very interesting tactile material which actually changes its state, and it kind of the milk also lives through kind of these same or very visually similar structural changes as human brain when it unfortunately gets, for example, Alzheimer's or vascular dementia. It really loses the mass and gets holes, and thus it really made the point for me to use this as the material for visualization dementia data. And to see here how big the problem is that we see that in Latvian society, almost one quarter of the society are seniors, over 62 years old. And World Health Organization thinks that because we get also better lifestyle, we age more, our societies are aging more, and if in 2015 we had approximately 15 millions of dementia patients, then in 2050 it could be already 152 million approximation of dementia patients. And I also this is another example of these data visualizations in milk. Here I used the refrigerator to really keep it in closed exhibition setting, stable for a longer time, because yeah, food is, and on one hand, very challenging material for that visualization because it's really unstable and changes quickly. But for me, it also, this is part of the magic, and it brings another layer. It really brings kind of this art and layer that it really challenges the notion of how true the statistics is now currently, and if the status quo is actually not changing, into which, and also to which way. So here you can see the food that should be eaten. Everybody who attended the workshop was very happy that 1 glass of wine is allowed per day. It was mentioned many times by a lot of visitors. And yeah, as you see, it's mostly this Mediterranean diet, which is healthy for the blood vessels, with a lot of whole grains and a lot of very colorful vegetables. And here one can see some of the data visualizations produced by the visitors. It was challenging for the people because a lot of them are told, especially the older generation, that you should not play with food. But then in a world where we really use plastics, disposable plastics every day, and feel very free to throw it away, we feel uncomfortable to use food to make art, which you can later even eat and, you know, take home and use really practically. In these visualizations, I asked people to reflect on their daily habits, giving information according to doctors, which is healthy for the brain health, and also they could reflect of some negative aspects for cognitive health. And for example, it is said that sports, of course, is very good, and eating vegetables is good for keeping good brain activity, and social activity is a crucial factor. But there are recent theories that most probably having not enough sleep is degrading our brain, and of course, most well-known aspects as smoking, alcohol, and traumas, which can lead to dementia or raises the risk of getting dementia if you have some genetical predisposition. And of course, I also worked with people who suffer for dementia to understand their situation, and it was very different experience from really having been challenged with dementia in my family, where you are really challenged by the fact that you have some already established relationships with your relative, who suddenly gets a totally new identity. So it is very challenging also for yourself, and very hard to work with your relative. But when working with strangers, I think we all had very good time. We challenged our perception of eating. We ate in a different manner, for example, with very long spoons, and by changing the color of the food using eye filters. So that's really kind of challenging our brain to adapt to new situations. And so we had a lot of laugh, and the patients they didn't want to really leave the room, although they could not really talk anymore to express how they feel. But this was why also working with food was so yeah, kind of perfect material because this is one of the last abilities that people still kind of keep when having these degrading processes. And we could speak in this non-verbal communication with gestures and just notions, physical notions, what to do. And thus had some good time. And also later the staff of the senior house told that they were happy all the day afterwards still. And yeah, here is the last slide I put. Maybe you want to know how does 1 year old milk look, because this will be then the next process of my project, this Dementia Diaries, where I am working together with Latvian Medicine Museum and their archives to make an exhibition there, more permanent exhibition, and there I will use this property of these olfactory and smell properties of milk products, which are not like, it's not a bad smell, it's a smell of cheese and age, really to refer to Alzheimer's research of brain degradation processes, because I am, as an artist and as a person, I am very worried because I have dementia in my family. So what is happening, with me? And these are these hidden processes. So I will explore them kind of more visible and make a conversation with the spectators and visitors of the museum through this food art exhibition then in November. So, and I guess this is also all I could showcase. I did not include in my presentation how really the brain suffers from dementia structurally, that it really loses some mass quite similarly like the milk products, unfortunately. And yes, and as I have talked with a lot of people now about dementia, not many of them know about this, what happens to inside of us. Yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Anna, for tackling so serious problem as an art project and as a healing art project. We are a bit running out of the time, therefore please put your questions in chat. I think Anna will be happy to answer, and to end with a more positive note, or maybe more enjoyable note. Thank you for giving us a glass of wine every day. Thank you very much. And now please welcome our last speaker, Pablo Roziak. And Pablo is a filmmaker, also active in a social field, working on fiction and documentary films with social topics, along with developing a film club for visually impaired young people. And most probably Pavel's presentation also will deal with some serious problem. Let's see. And Pavel, the floor now is yours.
Thank you. So, hello everybody. So I would first start to share my presentation. All right. So first, a little bit about the background of this project. So we are based in Prague in Czech Republic, and we are running our own film club. It's in the early, let's say, development stage. We are just trying the methods out, but we already are working with young people. And usually when we talk about cinema and blind children or young people or adults, it's something completely not connected together. Usually people think that it's not possible, because cinema is something visual, but actually what is very clear from, for example, our initiative is the quite opposite, that basically film is just a kind of language that is teachable, that the blind people can learn, and with like method, the right steps, they can learn filmmaking. So it's just about basically the right assistance. So all the visual side should be transferred to voice. So basically we are describing, we are talking about stories, we are describing what can be at the camera display, what they want to film. And with this like constant dialogue of what they want to film, we are able to create films together. But of course, one of the let's say small obstacles or problems in the beginning is that when we start to learn how to work with camera or editing software, it's completely not fit for blind people, because they have many buttons that are useless for them. Of course, the display is good only for assistants, not for the blind people. So what we try to develop is also a technological project, like a special kind of camera and editing software. So in this presentation, I would like to talk about the editing software that's kind of at the concept stage we would like to develop. But even this editing software will give you an idea about how technology can be accessible for visually handicapped people. So let's start. So as I said, this is basically a project that it's a concept stage. And it's our own idea of how to work with the editing process, which is probably the most challenging for blind people. The film editing softwares already work with AI technology, so they are moving into this direction, but they're of course not working with visually handicapped people yet. So we want to basically make technology accessible. We want to make it easier and interesting for blind people to work with. And this is, of course, a project that can have later on a global impact. It can have possible language versions and so on. It can be used worldwide. So most of you know how an editing software probably looks like. So this typical, I think it's Premiere Pro screenshot that is used by film professionals. And I just take the screenshot as an example of what we want to modify. So if you start from the left, basically there of course has to be a constant AI technology that describes the image. So it's a constant image to voice transfer. They already exist, these technologies. It's of course very basic, so the technology can only say like there's a person, there's something blue, there's a house. So it's of course very basic at this stage of development, but even this can help visually handicapped people a lot by recognizing what's going on the screen and so on. So this is like a constant image to voice transfer. Basically, the blind person communicates with the software by voice. So they are saying the basic inputs and the software is responding back. So they are communicating with software instead of assistant. And there are, of course, steps that the software can help the blind people to make every editing step forward possible. So basically, it's the editing software that should help people how to edit. So there is a built-in program from the rough material to the final cut. So this is how we would, in very general, modify the editing software. As I said, the most important is this AI technology that's already in use, describing very basically the objects on the screen. And of course, it's the voice assistant and voice control. So as we have the Siri in iPhones, for example, this is the same for the software that would work with blind people. Of course, the software in the beginning needs the second person to teach the blind person to work with it, but more and more they are independent. And this is the key point, that the blind people would work independently on their own films. That's basically what we always try to do and to promote. So just voice commands example, for example, what is in the first rough clips, so they know that they have shot something, and the software can describe very basically what's the content of the clip. So again, visual to voice transfer. And then the blind person can say, put it into timeline, make it shorter by 2 seconds. So all these basic commands that they, of course, have to learn in the beginning with the assistant, but after time they are intuitive and they can work on it independently. So again, the basic commands that the software will do without any visual need of control. So again, very useful would be the hardware for editing. So again, this is a screenshot of a typical professional, let's say, hardware, and the same can be modified for handicapped people so that everything is tactile, so that they know which button means what. And again, with this, with a joystick, special keyboard, constant like visual response, again, the editing can be much easier. And so okay, basically that's it from this presentation. So if you have any questions, or if you are interested in the project more, don't hesitate to write me, and we'll be happy to share our experience or to work more on this hardware software solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. I felt like very surprised when I initially read through your concept, and this was like how it is possible. However, there are some suggestions that people with hearing disabilities can play music and so on, and we are about to approach maybe a life where people have no such restrictions if they are ready to take challenges. But my question would be how you came upon, how you were interested in this problem. What was the initial stimulus, maybe, if I can ask?
So in the beginning, it was really only like a film project that I wanted to make about an NGO that's working with visually handicapped people in Prague. But over time, like I started to cooperate on different projects with the organization, and together with this NGO that's working with the target group since 2017, we are trying to like develop and connect cinema and visual handicap together. So they are, of course, doing many other things, working with arts in general, with sports and so on. But like my part of cooperation is this cinematic project that we try to develop together. So we are cooperating with an NGO in Prague that's basically working with visually handicapped children.
Okay, and of course, this is a process rather than, I am not brave enough to ask, where are the results? Of course not, but still, what you expect these children might do in future with films, maybe, or what are the impact of this activity for these children?
Well, of course, we actually had like a trial, let's say, short course for children at a special school, and they have already actually created their own short films. So we already have these first results that, yeah, they are basically even like young children are able to create very short films. Now we are working on, like, basically we are wanted to promote this project for a little bit older kids or children, And yeah, actually the result is not at all difficult, because over the, for example, year's course, they really can create their own film. So their own script, own editing, and of course with assistance, but yeah, they are actually able to create films. So this is the main result, because with these films, we can continue more. And second step is what we try the most as well, that they become independent in film creation. So that they learn the skills, and maybe with like an assistant in the future or on their own, they are basically able to create their short films like everyone else. So this is the goal in the films and the independence.
And one thing I was wondering about was how the children reacted to your proposal initially at the beginning of your activity.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. When we work with young children, they were all into it. So basically we almost had no problems. So they created groups and they created films together. So with a little bit older, let's say teenagers, yeah, of course, some of them are not sure about this. So it's completely new for them. They're a little bit afraid of it. So yeah, there is a kind of a block maybe for some children that it's too new for them. But on the other hand, like we have now a participant, young lady that is very into it, and with whom we are like starting now a new year's course. So yeah, so of course for some of them it's too new, but over time I think the young people can see that it's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, and they can overcome this limitation and really make films. Of course, talent is everywhere, and maybe some of them are talented too. Yeah, and Juliana Priest wants to ask you, and maybe Julian, you can ask you directly to Pavel. We have some minutes spare time.
Yeah, can you hear okay? Yes. Can you hear? I can't hear you now.
It's very low, your audio.
Okay. Is that better? Yeah. So I was reading when I was looking up about the sensorium, the topic of the conference. I was looking at. I was reading a thing about the hierarchy of senses in Russian culture, and how sight in some Russian psychology texts, sight is treated as a kind of subset of touch. And I wondered if there was something similar in Czech culture.
I'm not sure if that's that direct, but of course, yeah, for visually impaired people, like the touch and sound is the most important. So yeah, that's what also we try to do with this technology, so that they can like make contact with it by touch, and it's easy like to touch and to operate by touch. But yeah, I don't think that in Czech culture in general, it's like so direct that there is this hierarchy, and no, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julian. And now Krista Dinter asks, do these films should be watched with eyes closed and with screen speech interpreter to understand the process of making them, thus creating a completely new gender or genre?
Okay, so if you mean the films created by children, then no, basically what we want to try is that they are completely like normal films. So the audience can watch them as they would watch any other film. Actually, the point is that the blind people can basically say something to the world through these films. It's not something completely new, but they are. The point is that they can create a film that's saying something to their friends, general public, and so on. So there is no need to have anything like special for the screening. It's just the process of filmmaking that's different, but not the output.
Yeah, thank you, Pavel, very much. And I'm very proud of our panel. I think we did a great job together, and we tackled two main, maybe topics, and these two last ones was really serious and were very serious. And I'm proud that younger generation keen to tackle all these. And now, on behalf of RIXC, I would like to invite you to other breakout rooms, this 1A, because there is a last presentation. Of course, it is an option, and but it is possible still to catch other panel too. And with this, I would like to conclude our panel and see you in next presentations and panels, and keep in touch. Thank you, and we are about to leave our breakout room to this main room.